Elegy. No sweet, a little a little coupon for like a relapse giveaway that is probably expired now by like several decades or just 1995. Yeah, this thing is about 18 years old, so I'm a little too late for that. Wah. Anyway, so Elegy is Amorphis' third album. It was released back in 1986, and it already showed a great transition from the early sound of their death metal days. I mean, of course, they would continue to perform death metal. It's just they would perform it to a much lesser extent later on. Before death metal vocals would dominate albums such as Tales from the Thousand Lakes and the Carillion Isthmus. But then starting with Elegy, you see more of a focus towards clean melodic vocals like that you hear on Far From the Sun and Universum, even though you heard like one growl in like the pre-chorus of the opening track alone, where it's like, start up. But that's about it, really. For the most part, it's only clean vocals provided by the newly acquired Pasi Koskinen. So with this album, this is the ultimate transition album for the band. This basically combined the best of both worlds, so to speak. Like I said, this album really captures the band like in a great peak of transition. You could definitely tell that they're moving away from the raw style of their previous two albums and going to a much more melodic and much more well-produced style of metal. Although it's not quite as well-produced as an album like Eclipse or Skyforger or Universum, you could definitely tell that they're inching closer and closer to that realm of music. This definitely does not sound like an album that you would hear being released in the 2000s or anything like that. This sounds distinctly like an album you would hear in the 1990s because it still has a bit of that raw style that you heard on the previous albums, but just combining it with a much more melodic aspect that you would hear on the next albums. It has like 80s style keyboards, it's got more acoustic guitars, it's got more clean vocals, so you could definitely tell it's basically them right in the middle of probably their biggest transition out of all. It's basically their biggest peak of amorphing. And what's really cool about the songcraft here is that the lyrics here and much the music is made to be reflective of like the 700 poems and ballads based on like ancient Finnish traditions. I'm talking about the Kantaletar here, which is basically second to the Kalevala in historical significance. Like, I know the Kalevala, they basically copy and pasted the lyrics from that to the songs and tales from the Thousand Lakes, and it would inspire much of the albums that they did with Tommy Utzon much later on. But for this particular album, they used the Kantaletar, which again, it's like basically second only to the Kalevala when it comes to Finnish folklore. And yeah, they didn't like copy and paste the lyrics or anything from that. It's merely just like inspired by those poems. I'm merely just like reading the back of this because I don't really know much about the Kantaletar, but again, it just says on the back of this booklet here, so that's pretty much how I know about it. And unlike a lot of people, even though it took me a little bit to get into his vocals because I'd first heard Tommy Utzon and then gotten into him, Pasi Koskinen is actually really cool. Yeah, again, it took me a little bit to get into him at first because I've heard Tommy Utzon's really deep baritone voice, and then suddenly you hear Pasi with this very like nasally sort of voice, and the transition going from Tommy to Pasi felt a little jarring at for the most part, but once I got into him, I really did get into his voice. I've been trying to do a couple Amorphis covers, like imitating Posy, and yeah, he just sounds really cool. And I really like his performance on this album. And again, that's one of the things that makes this album unique because you have two official vocalists basically switching back and forth between clean and harsh vocals. Tomi Koivusari, of course, he was the growler in the previous two albums. He retains that for this album, and Posy doing clean vocals on this album. I don't know, Posy has a few, like, rougher screamed passages, like, every now and then, like in the song Against Widows and Cares, but for the most part, it's just like clean singing. It's not exactly a growl, it's just like a rougher vocal, so to speak. I really like the songmanship on this album. I love this album's diversity. I love how it's just taken in more elements that they'll further use and incorporate on their later albums. They have a sitar. I think they have a flute here and there. Oh wait, no, I don't think they use a flute. I think they used an accordion in the reprise of My Cantale, and they have keyboards again, those 80s style keyboards that we've loved on the Tales from the Thousand Lakes album. I don't think they have organs on here, or at least not to the extent of Tales from the Thousand Lakes, but I think they're there every once in a while. And they also, I think they used like an electronic dance beat or whatever during the song Cares, along with like almost a Hawaiian beat of some sort. Yeah, Cares is like probably one of the most diverse songs in this band's discography, and they just do so much with that one little track. Yeah, again, like a Hawaiian and like a electronic dance beat. They're able to incorporate that and just make it sound so solid, so like flowing, so to speak. It doesn't sound out of place at all. It just sounds like, oh yeah, that sounds really cool, and it was meant to be there. And if you're able to take elements like that into just one song and make it sound great, you got yourself a true highlight. Cares is a great song. Yeah, My Cantale is a classic. Born Again, or no, Better Unborn, is just a great, great track. Against Widows is, of course, a classic. The Orphan is a very nice ballad. There's just so many songs to name off of here. The title track, Elegy. There's just so many great songs on here. It's just a very diverse, very enjoyable album. It's very solid all around. I really like the direction that these guys were going with this one. Probably one of my top 5 favorite Amorphis albums of all time. I'd probably have to give it like an 8.75 out of 10. I think that might be about it. I think that's all I really have to say about this album. It's just a brilliant, brilliant release from these guys. Probably my favorite album of theirs. Yeah, it's my favorite album of theirs in the 1990s. I love Tales from the Thousand Lakes as well, but to me, this one beats it by a fairly slim margin. But yeah, that's about it. Thank you very much for watching, and stay tuned for Tuanella.